So for more on the election, Mexico, and this AMLO-Biden theory, we now go now to Duncan Wood, director of the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute, for more. Duncan, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining us on the show. How's everything?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thanks, man. How are you?
I'm good, Duncan. Duncan, first question. If the Democrats win in a landslide, will Republicans threaten to move to Mexico? And then will I be eating mole with white men from the South with no college education and QAnon supporters?
Listen, you can but dream, Dan. Okay, so let's hope for your sake that comes true. Listen, I think that the valid point that you're making here is, will people accept the outcome of this election? And I was talking with colleagues from other think tanks recently, and there's a very real possibility that we will see violence after the election in the United States, and nobody wants that. But tensions are very high. You've painted a picture of the American electorate tonight as being ready to change the president, but don't forget that the president still commands around 44% support, and whilst Biden is leading him in national polls and in many of the battleground states, those same polls have shown to be wrong. Those same polls have been shown to change rapidly, and imagine this nightmarish scenario on November the 3rd, that as the votes are counted, that Trump himself wins the election that night. But over the next few days, as all of the early voting ballots are counted, as the mail-in ballots are counted, that Trump lead gradually disappears.
Right.
And if it disappears, then people get really, really concerned, and they begin to think it's a conspiracy. And that's what's really concerning right now. So I have to say that, for the first time in my life, I'm concerned about the results of a U.S. election being accepted by, a significant number or even a large minority of the U.S. population. That's really, really scary. That's the kind of thing that we talk about perhaps with regards to Mexico, but not with the U.S.
Yeah, it's funny. And I think that we're going to have like a lot of people from LA walking around Condesa and Roma, right? Be like, oh my God, that mole was just like so delicious. So we're going to have an invasion from the US, right? Into Mexico probably. But this is really concerning. Now, let's talk about October surprises, right? I mean, it seems like everything has happened and Trump is just really desperate right now, lashing out right this week with his cabinet members and really putting them down, especially Bill Barr, who has been, his saving grace, his greatest attorney general for Trump, because he's really backed up Trump's garbage that he's done. So what's going on in Washington? I know that you're right there. What are people talking about these days?
A lot of things. That there is obviously the president doesn't like the fact that he's behind in the polls, but the president has a certain kind of character that we've all become quite familiar with over the past 4 years, which is that he refuses to accept the information that's out there in the public sphere if it's not what he wants to hear. And so, I think that he's definitely trying to change the public narrative about his campaign. He's definitely trying to rally his supporters. And one thing I will say, Dan, I mean, if there's excitement in this election, it's not just those people who say we want this to be over. It's those people who go out there to Trump rallies, as they did in North Carolina today, in their hundreds and thousands. And they go to campaign. They go to be with the president, a president who they feel represents them better than anybody else. And, that again, and I know we've made this comparison many, many times, but that sounds so much like what happens in Mexico, right? That there is a man at the top who speaks to such a large segment of the population and represents their identity. Even though he may be completely different from them, somehow they connect with him. And, that excitement may be something that can actually influence this election, because on the day we may see a high turnout from Trump voters. In the early polling, we don't know if all those people who've gone out to cast their votes early are Democrats. There could be a lot of Trump, and there probably are a lot of Trump voters there. What about the mail-in votes? A lot of older folks who voted for Trump the first time around, maybe they don't feel comfortable going to the polls, so they've mailed in their ballots. One thing I will say, though, and that is that, I think that the president getting COVID 11 days ago, that has really hit him with regards to the Florida vote. You can see in the poll there that a lot of the older folks in Florida who were willing to believe the president's version of events on COVID, they now have turned against him. And Biden gave a speech the other night, I have to say, or the other day rather, where he was talking. It was in Florida, and he said, the president is hosting a super spreader event at the White House. Republicans are hugging each other. When was the last time you were able to hug your grandkids?
Right.
Now,
That's the last time you saw a Republican hug someone in public. They usually do it behind closed doors.
Think about the message. Something that appeals not just to old folks in Florida. That appeals to pretty much everybody. All of us who have been missing our families during this. So there's so many weird factors about this election. It's unlike anything that I've seen before. And I'm convinced that whether there's an October surprise or not, there are a lot more twists and turns before the end of this story.
Well, so many people have voted, and you're right. There's been record turnout by Democrats. There's been record registrations by Democrats, and the lines in urban centers where there are more Democratic voters are long. In the Washington Post, they said, well, maybe it's not going to be so long that we know the outcome because so many people are voting early to make sure their vote counts. But let's switch gears. We only have a couple of minutes left, and because you are the director of the Mexico Institute, in the 2016 election, Mexico was mentioned all the time, bad hombres in the debate, like Mexico was the focal point, and now it's not. But what is going on with Mexico in this U.S. election? Is there silence? Is there chatter going on? Tell us more about this.
Listen, the positive references actually come from President Trump this time around, which is to say that the Mexicans have been helping the United States in controlling migration. That's the message from the Trump camp. And I think you're right. That's an absolute surprise. We expected there to be a lot more aggression against Mexico, a message perhaps on drugs and violence, etc. But that hasn't happened. And part of that is down to the very positive relationship that we've seen between AMLO and Trump. But I think the real factor here is that the foreign policy issues this time around are very different. It's about China. It's about Russia. And no matter who wins in November, those issues are going to be front and center. And I think that, even if you see a Biden victory, Mexico is going to be far down the list of foreign policy priorities, because a Biden administration will have to prove that it's tough on migration. It's going to prove that it's tough on China. It's going to prove that it's tough on Iran. It's going to prove that it's tough on Venezuela. All of these things. There's one little thing that I'd love to leave your audience with, though, and that is the intriguing concept of a Biden administration and an AMLO administration working together on Cuba. And imagine that. You could have Mexico and the United States working together towards an opening of Cuba. That would be a fascinating prospect.
Well, especially if he wins Florida, right? If he doesn't win Florida, I'm sure that may not happen, but that's interesting. And do you think that AMLO is going to be working closely with a Biden administration? Do you think he's going to take the same approach to make sure that the American relationship is really important to his administration and his economy?
He doesn't have any choice. I mean, the relationship is so important. I think he'll try to use the same cards as he used with Trump on migration, stemming Central American migration. But I think that he'll face a very different president across the border. Biden is a more multi-dimensional president, I think, when it comes to the bilateral relationship, and that will create new complexities for the AMLO people.
Perfect. Duncan, I would love to have you on the show after the election and to talk more about that in case there is a Biden administration. And Duncan, you were the first guest that we've ever had on the Pinchy Gringo Show and now the Gringo Show. So we're very honored that you're
And I'm not even a gringo. I'm
and congratulations for your newborn as well.
Thank you, Dan. Great to see you.
Duncan Wood, director of the Mexico Institute at the Wilson Center.